tell people this all the time. Graceland is a museum to a dead rock star that most people didn't know. And thousands of people go and light candles there every year to honor this person they didn't even know. And nothing is touched in his home. And people think that's normal, but it's not okay for a mama who lost her child to hold on to his blanket. Are you kidding me? What is wrong with us?
Welcome to recoverHER, the podcast where your healing journey begins. I'm Heather Novak, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Tracy Oppenheim, a compassionate psychiatrist. Today, we embark on a path of recovery and self-discovery. We are dedicated to inspiring each and every one of you to overcome your struggles and live your best, most fulfilling life. Your recovery starts now, and we're here with you every step of the way.
It's only up from here, 'cause there's no one else that's me.
Welcome back to recoverHER podcast. Today we have a very special guest with us. Dr. Joanne Cacciatore is with us virtually. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, let us brag about you for a minute. For those of you who don't know Dr. Jo, she's a professor at Arizona State University and a leading expert in traumatic grief. She is the founder of the MISS Foundation, an international nonprofit supporting families who have experienced the death of a child or other traumatic loss, and the creator of Selah Carefarm, the first therapeutic care farm in the United States for the traumatically bereaved. Dr. Jo is also the author of the award-winning bestseller, Bearing the Unbearable, Love, Loss, and Heartbreaking Path of Grief, and a Zen priest who works to bridge science, compassion, and spiritual practice. Her research has been published in leading journals, and her work has been featured in Oprah Winfrey and Prince Harry's docuseries, The Me You Can't See. Today, she joins us to talk about grief, love, and how we carry the unbearable together and wherever else our hearts and minds take us today. So thank you for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. It's good to be here.
So we like to start with a little game of Would You Rather? And
Because that's fun.
yeah, do you want to do the Would You Rather, or do you want me to take it?
You go ahead.
All right.
We picked through a couple.
Yeah. Would you rather get a sign, a true sign from someone you've lost from wherever they are now, or would you rather dream about them every night for a year?
I think I'll opt for the first option, a real sign, undeniable sign. Yeah.
And why'd you pick that one?
I picked that one because dreams are a little more obscure in terms of their messaging.
Right.
And an undeniable message feels something a little more solid rather than ethereal.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any, speaking of kind of like undeniable messaging, tell me about some of the experiences of people that you work with, what they've felt, seen, heard from the other side.
Oh, I mean, people have really extraordinary experiences. And actually, I've studied it. We published a study on, I don't call them hallucinations, even though the medical model does.
Okay.
I call them extraordinary perceptual experiences.
Yeah.
And so many clients who come to the Care Farm and who are involved in our nonprofit experience extraordinary perceptual experiences that, that feel quite real as messages to them. They feel like a visit, or they feel like a message from the other side. And they may well be. I mean, who am I to say that they aren't? And so I of course, leave myself open to possibility. I think wise and intelligent people leave themselves open to possibilities and don't stubbornly deny. And so I myself have had some extraordinary perceptual experiences, and I have borne witness to many of them with people whose kids have died, but also partners and parents and siblings. Yeah.
You're just attuned to it. when your eyes are wide open, you get to experience all of it.
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes it's, embodied in just the right moment, timing with a bumblebee that's representative to them of something, someone. And sometimes it's a bigger sign. Sometimes it's so obvious that it is undeniable for them. A voice, a smell, a movement of something in a home. And, in some cultures, if you experience that, you're a medicine man or a medicine woman. In the West, if you experience that, you're at risk of being diagnosed with something like schizophrenia. So you have to be careful to whom you share truths like this when they happen, unfortunately.
Well, you're such a beautiful, safe space to share those types of experiences with. I recall the very first time that I met you, and that was in the early 2000s. So the three of us have a beautiful mutual friend in our dear friend Maya. But I first met you through my girlfriend Carrie Bell, who lost her baby
Parker. That's
she.
Parker's mom.
Yeah, I love it. You just have a beautiful memory. Like thinking about that makes me just you bringing wow. So Carrie lost her baby a week before her due date. And so she found you through the Miss Foundation. And that's how I originally met you. Can you tell me a little bit about what that was?
The Miss Foundation, I'm still involved. Yeah, I started it in 96.
Yeah.
Holy cow. So, I mean, I guess that means we're coming up on 30 years,
I know.
which is really hard to believe.
It is hard to believe.
Gosh, what the heck? That just hit me. Holy shit, Heather.
Yeah.
We're coming up on 30 years ago. I started it because my daughter died. And there was really nothing that felt supportive for me. And so I was flailing quite a bit. I weighed 88 pounds and I couldn't eat. I had what felt like a grapefruit stuck in my throat all the time. And people could not have been more grief illiterate back then. I mean, it's still grief illiterate today. It's still grief insensitive today. It's still hard to be a griever in the world today. But in 94, it was even harder because you didn't have the benefit of the internet. You couldn't even connect with other grievers on the internet.
Sure.
You had to try to find a support group. So that's why I started the foundation. And I think Parker's dad, Jeff, were involved in the foundation early on. And I think that's, I think even Jeff sat on our board for a few years. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm going back a long time, and my brain is 60 years old now, so it's very hard for me to access information all the time.
Boy, you were right on it, though. Yeah, Jeff and Carrie Bell, they're still. I love them both dearly today, and their two daughters, and they're off in college now. One just graduated from Auburn, but yeah, when Parker died, that was when you came into all of our lives.
Yes.
Thank God for you, because at the time in the early 2000s, there weren't, prior to you in your experience in the 90s, late 90s, there just weren't resources out there for parents that were struggling. What do I do with all this emotion? What do I do with this loss? What do I do with this all-encompassing grief that's like eating me alive? What do I do with all of that? And you were a place for families to land, to allow, I don't know, in my never to be so humble opinion, I just recall you so beautifully holding space for people.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is to create safe places where people feel like they can fully inhabit their grief. The problem is that everyone today exists in a world that's not just grief avoidant, but griever avoidant. So it's not unusual for me to hear stories of people in the grocery store, and they come around the corner and see a neighbor, and the neighbor locks eyes with them and turns their cart around and goes the other way.
Right.
And I mean, this kind of avoidance just exacerbates the already very, very salient sense of loneliness that people inherently have because of the nature of traumatic grief. It's a really lonely, isolating experience. And so how do we fully inhabit something when all the messages around us are, this feeling that you have isn't something that we welcome.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we create space to welcome something that's so overwhelming and that has such little structure around social support?
And Dr. Joe, is that part of the name, why you chose the name you did for the care farm?
Selah. So Selah Carefarm, it's actually a Hebrew word,
Mm-hmm.
and it means pause.
Yes.
So it's prolific. You might know this in the Psalms. You'll get to the end of a chapter in the Psalms, and it says Selah.
Yes.
And the idea is don't keep reading. Stop reading here and reflect on what you just read. Be with what you just read and experienced. And that's the whole idea for the farm is it's a place, it's an intentional community, it's an intentional restorative space for people who have had traumatic bereavement. And there are very few places like that where grief is welcomed, not just tolerated, but welcomed.
Yeah.
You know, someone comes to the farm and they're sitting under a willow tree sobbing. No one walks up to them and hands them a Kleenex and says, "Come on, let's go get a drink."
Yeah.
Yes.
You're
Because
okay.
that happens to grieving people.
Absolutely.
And then when the person starts going to get a drink, when the grieving person then on her own starts getting a drink at the bar because that's how she's learned to cope, then everyone wags their finger at her and calls her an addict. And there's no social responsibility of other people
Right.
in her sphere of support. Like, you know, I hear these stories all the time about how best friends come over and try to comfort someone by giving them a bottle of wine or a cocktail. And that's the wrong answer for this. Here at the farm, someone's crying under a willow tree. People just come and sit next to you or curl up next to you, or a goat will curl up next to you.
Yeah.
And you are allowed to just be and feel. And it's okay. It's not just okay, it's welcomed.
What do you wish more people understood about grief as transformational and not pathological, like in an experience of a whole?
Well, I mean, I think, and this is a hot topic. Not all grief is created equal. You know, if I was close to my neighbor, I love my neighbor. Neighbor's a really cool person. I actually do have a really cool neighbor. And if she were to die, I would be sad and I would probably have some grief, but it's going to be a different grief than my child dying.
Right.
I mean, really, we have to be honest about this. Not all grief is created equal. And so traumatic grief is very different. I mean, my 98-year-old grandma who dies a quote good death with hospice and pain well controlled is going to feel different than my 5-year-old dying of cancer.
Yeah.
And so traumatic grief itself is fundamentally so different from other kinds of grief. And of course, nomenclatural systems like psychiatry with the DSM don't consider context. The entire book boasts, and the people who write the book boast about being a contextual because it's supposed to be a quote scientific manual. The problem is it's not scientific, and B, context matters. If we don't think context matters, then all three of us should have come to the podcast in a bikini. Context matter. I mean, it's okay to wear a bikini to a pool party because context matters. We don't wear bikini to professional podcasts because context matters. And even in the simplest, most ridiculous aspects of life, like something I just gave, that example I just gave, if it matters then, how much more would it matter when someone we love dies? So context does matter. And what people don't understand is that traumatic bereavement is different than non-traumatic bereavement. Of course, I'm sad when my 98-year-old grandma dies. And of course, I miss her. And of course, I'm going to cry and I'm going to think about her. And my heart's going to go, oh, grandma, I miss you. I love you. Thank you for the good times. Thank you for the beauty you left behind. Thank you for teaching me these things. Thank you for your favorite vegan recipes. Thank you for all these things, grandma. But when my 5-year-old dies, it's a whole different landscape. It's an entirely different landscape.
So I'm taking it you're not a fan of the diagnosis of prolonged grief disorder. I'm teasing when I say that.
That is correct.
Yes. No, I wholeheartedly agree with you, and I can tell you as a psychiatrist, I have seen some really terrible things happen to people who are just in the midst of a traumatic loss. I remember being so confused. I do a lot of different things. There was a time in my career where I did a lot of inpatient behavioral health work, and I remember being very early in my career, and there was a woman that had lost a child, and was admitted to a behavioral health unit, and the family of this patient was very concerned about her behavior. They just wanted her back. They wanted her back the way she was before. And she had a lot of rituals that she would do around her grief. And what was so, I mean, I can feel it in my body, like when I'm thinking about the scene that I would come upon, and that she would try to continue to do some of these rituals on this behavioral health unit. And some of their rituals involved a photo album of her child. Some of the rituals involved a lock of hair of her child. Some of her rituals involved a blanket of her child. And yeah, they took away those items.
Oh, man.
Because her treatment team felt that it was keeping her stuck.
Oh, man. This is thank you for sharing that story, Dr. Tracy. That there's the problem, right? We blame grieving people for their ongoing distress, but they live in a really inhospitable world that averts the gaze, that turn away from them consistently. Not only that pathologizes everything that's absolutely normal. I mean, for God's sake, I tell people this all the time. Graceland is a museum.
Yeah.
To a dead rock star that most people didn't know.
Right.
And thousands of people go and light candles there every year to honor this person they didn't even know. And nothing is touched in his home. And people think that's normal, but it's not okay for a mama who lost her child to hold on to his blanket.
Are you kidding me? What is wrong with us?
That's
such a good fucking point you just made about Graceland.
Great example.
Never thought about that like that.
Yeah, it's super fucked up.
I just would like your thoughts or whatever comes up for you, but we all have our different experiences with grief. But in terms of my family constellation, when my mom was pregnant with me, my sister was actively dying. So for most of my in utero experience, and this was back in the early 70s. So during my in utero experience, she was navigating a dying child who was removed from the home and institutionalized, in a very sterile nursing home, from what I was told, for the dying process. And I never learned about Eileen until, I don't know, I would say I was probably about 5 or 6, and I remember I was in the back of my mom's car. I was eating a Happy Meal. I don't know why I remember that, but I was eating this Happy Meal, and I realized that the car had stopped moving, and so I kind of picked up my head, and looked around, and I didn't understand where we were, but it turns out we were in a cemetery. And so when my mother and grandmother came back to the car, I said, "Where are we?" And they still didn't directly tell me that my mom was visiting my sister. I didn't know I had a sister. And then later on, somehow I was in the basement, and there was a big picture of who I thought the whole time was me, of a baby in the basement. And I asked my mom, I said, "Was that me?" And that's when she told me it was my sister. And so my point in bringing this up is there was like very little discussion. In the 70s, my mom had there was just nothing, no ability for her to process that. And I always sensed a deadening of her, my mother, in a way. And I And I feel like I have, like, carry like a certain heaviness with me.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know if you could speak to that.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by it, Dr. Tracy. You can imagine doing this work for 30 years. I've heard similar stories. Yeah. First of all, intergenerational grief and trauma are a thing, for sure. But also, as you were talking, what came to my heart was an email I got from someone who I eventually started working with, and she said that when she was young, she lost her baby sister, and that not once, her email said this line, not once in 64 years after my sister died did my mother come back to me in her heart. And that's heartbreaking to hear. And also this is something I've heard repeatedly. But I think also we just kind of carry some of the loss with us, even if our parents show up emotionally. But also, I think that there's a certain shadow that follows people, especially when it becomes a loss. The loss of an important person becomes the family secret.
Mm.
So my mother, my grandparents and my parents were immigrants. My parents were young when they came. And my grandparents on my mother's side, my grandmother lost a 2-year-old. Her name was Josephine. She went on to have another girl who was 8 or 9 months old when she died. Her name was also Josephine. And the third child my grandmother had, she decided to name the baby Mary, another girl, third baby. She thought maybe the name Josephine was cursed. It was an old school, old village thing. And her fourth child was a girl. She named Josephine again. So my mother was the namesake of her 2 dead siblings. And my grandmother was not a warm woman. My grandmother was mean and cold and detached, and she parented my mother that way. And my mother was also very unemotional and very attachment was an issue for my mother because of her mother. And that shit doesn't just get passed down cellularly, it gets passed down through social learning as well. And I think I always sensed this looming loss or trauma of something. I just never quite knew what it was. And I didn't find out until many years later after my grandmother died. And we were sifting through old photographs and I found pictures of the first Josephine who died and the second Josephine who died. And I'm like,
wow.
How is it you guys never talk to me about this? Do you know what I do? You know who I am?
Right.
Like, what is wrong with you? And so there is an impact intergenerationally, but there's also an impact and a more immediate impact on the current generation. I can imagine the stress hormones that were pulsing through your mother's body while she was pregnant with you.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know that any emotional stress creates a biochemical response in the body, norepinephrine, cortisol, glucocorticoids that are flowing through the bloodstream that are passing through the placenta.
Mm-hmm.
And that the baby is getting. And so I can imagine that you have been impacted by this huge loss. And then you're born into a world. At what point did your sister die?
I think I was about, so she had Tay-Sachs, which is a neurodegenerative disorder. And so I think I was about
Yes.
18 months when she passed.
Yeah. So you don't have conscious memories, but implicit memory is a thing. And so you probably remember at some cellular level, the house becomes a house of pain.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
There's a beautiful book, by the way, written by Javi's mom, who also died of Tay-Sachs. And it's called 57 Fridays. And they found me before Javi began her dying process, but after her diagnosis, and they knew she wouldn't live long. And it's a really beautiful book. I'll see if I can't get a copy, get a copy out to you. I think you'll really, it's a beautiful book. And Javi's mom is, and dad, and family, just beautiful family.
Mm.
That would be wonderful. And so I appreciate that. And Heather and I were having a conversation yesterday, actually, because
Mhm.
you were at a Jewish funeral
Yeah, I was.
for a friend's mother.
Who died unexpectedly. One of my dear friends, Sabra, lost her mother. And, I just found myself so grateful to be holding space just to witness their grief. That was so profoundly beautiful to me.
Yeah.
And I hugged Sabra with this big embrace, heart to heart. And the only thing I said to her is, it was a beautiful expression of her faith on how the Jewish community honors the dead.
So I was teasing Heather a little bit, and I was like, yeah, my people, we do a lot of things that are right around death and dying,
Yeah,
and that
they do.
there is a ritualized component to it, but it does kind of almost have a cutoff date in some ways, where through the first 11 months. Just thinking about like ritual in general, how do you guide people, or do you guide people to incorporate that into their lives?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have lots of opportunities for ritual here on the farm. We have a cloudy tree, and we have a medallion tree, and we have a grotto area where people can light candles and paint rocks. And it's a pretty phenomenal, space. But then we also really encourage them to take that home in a practice. We call it a practice, taking home a practice. That's a very Buddhist thing, right? What's your practice, right? And so that might be meditating with your dead, or it might be burning a candle, or setting a place at the table. Or, I mean, there are all kinds of, I call them, in one of my research studies, what we found was that people went from doing ritual to doing what we call micro ritual.
Okay.
So, ritual is sort of this bigger thing that we talk about doing, and it's usually a very public thing and people join you. But then there's something that's very sublime called micro rituals. And it can be as nuanced as someone just saying, "Good morning, son, I love you," to a little boy who died. I had one dad I worked with who that was their ritual. "Good morning, son, I love you. Good morning, dad, I love you." And so just continuing to say that to his son after he died for as long as he wants to. And at last I checked in, he was still doing it. And it had been, I think it's been like 12 years since his son died. So, I mean, some people might think that's whatever. I mean, think whatever you want.
Right.
Until you've buried your child, keep your mouth shut. You don't get an opinion on this. You don't get to colonize people's experience. This is a no-fly zone for you if you haven't been through it. So, I tell people that all the time. And because rightly or wrongly, people see me as some sort of expert, and I'm not. I'm just an ordinary person doing my thing. I just happen to be doing the same thing for a long time, and I study a lot, and I'm a researcher. But because I am perceived to be some kind of an expert in this and some kind of authority in this, when I tell them, you don't have to put up with that. You can say, "Thank you, but no thank you." You can say, "That's not my truth." You can say, "When you bury your child, then you can do it your way."
Right.
It gives people a lot of locus of control, internal locus of control. It gives them a feeling of power that they're able to say to people, "You don't get to talk to me like that." Like, that's a boundary you don't get to cross.
What a beautiful gift that you give to the people that come into your world, of that permission to simply feel your grief. When we live, as you said so eloquently, in a culture that wants you to resolve those hard, negative, heavy emotions and be like, get over it, be done with it, and that is unimaginable. I don't think that humans are ever capable of just getting over it, a loss of a child. I don't think I'd survive. So I don't know how you witness and hold space for some of these really, how do you transmute that energy, or don't you? So grieving in this space, in this container, in this farm, in this village, this safe place that you've not only imagined but created and live in. How do you surround yourself with the heavy allowing and bearing witness to people walking that path? Do you transmute it into something beautiful and good?
I mean, not really. I just let myself feel it. I mean, the reality is I'd much rather be around an honest, sad person than a dishonest, happy person.
Yeah, isn't
Fuck
that
yes.
true?
You know,
Right.
I mean, most people who are quote happy, you know, those happy-go-lucky people, it's just a facade. You know, it's not real. So I'd much rather be around someone who's just real and just sad and honest. And when you join them in the sadness, then and you let the bottom fall out, then the top comes up.
Yeah. Right.
And then they can experience other things
The
too.
ebb and
Once you
flow.
join them in it, you can make space for other things. And then whatever joy or happiness comes, if it does, when it does, if it does, is authentic and
Right.
it's genuine and it's real and it has a whole other level. And so I don't really transmute it or transfigure it. I don't
Sure.
really even concern myself with it.
No.
But I also recognize that it's not mine. I have my own, you know, like I
Sure.
got my own stuff. I'll look in their bag with them and I'll help them carry their bag, and I'll even take their bag and move it from a hot, hard place to a shady,
Yeah.
grassy knoll. And, you know, and I'll do that, but I don't try to take it home with me. It's not mine to take home. That doesn't
No.
mean I don't cry.
Right.
But it's crying for them, not crying for me. It's crying for with the pain that they're having. And I realize, and I have very clear emotional and cognitive boundaries, that that's not my pain. That's their pain. I'm not the primary griever here. I have my own stuff I deal with, and then I have to do my own work. And when you ask me, what do I do with it? I have a very solid practice. I mean, first of all, animals and nature. I hike barefoot.
Yeah.
I have a sit practice. You know, I eat clean, play dirty. I sweat. I'm constantly hiking. You know, so I'm very clear about what my practice is, and I turn to my practice and I'm deeply self-aware. So I know when I'm getting to the point where I'm like, okay, you're super cranky today. Maybe you need a little your time, and I'll take some time. So, and that's essential for people if they're going to be good counselors or good therapists or good helpers, even as a peer. You have to do your own work.
Right.
You have to do your own work.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Absolutely. For someone just entering, you know, a deep, you know, someone just experienced a huge loss, right? You know, what are some kind of go-tos, you know, in the early days, you know, that you offer to people and to the family, you know, supporting?
Well, that's hard to say because it's hard to protocolize something like this. It's essential that, you know, we consider culture and context and situations. But in general, one of the first things I ask is, what's your support look like? If people are in early or acute traumatic grief and their support is low, then I'm saying to them, we need to rally the troops. Let's get you some good support. And that could come in the form of support groups. It could come, you know, go to a program at the Carefarm, because we have programs here. I mean, it could be an online support group, an in-person support group. It could be a rescue animal. I mean, animals, in one of my research studies, animals outperformed every human group. Animals rated, by grieving people, animals rated 89% satisfaction. Family and friends rated in the 30 something percent. Therapists rated in the 30 or 40 something percent. The only closest human group were support groups that came in the 60 percentage. But animals rated 89%.
Is there a specific animal?
No, I mean, they just talked about in the qualitative data, they were talking about like mostly domesticated animals, and then people talked about horses. So it was mostly cats, dogs, some birds, a couple of people had birds and horses, and it was a robust sample. I mean, I think there were 1,100 participants. So we only collected data for 6 days, and then I was like, I didn't expect this much data, so we shut the study down because it was going to be a lot to analyze because we had qualitative data, and it's hard to pour through that much qualitative data. So we shut the study down after 6 days, but I mean, 89% satisfaction with animals. And why? Because they're not encumbered by stupid words.
Sure.
Words get humans in trouble. Trying to fix it, trying to make people feel better gets humans in trouble. And animals just seem to sit and stay, you know? And so, so I think circling back to what we were talking about, I think we have a problem in our society, in our culture, and that results in some things that look like pathology in individual grievers, but it's not a pathology of individual grievers. It's a pathology of society.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the example that you gave me, Tracy, of a grieving mom being put inpatient in a behavioral health unit.
Whew.
She's not having behavioral health trouble. She's having her child died. That's an emotional issue. Even
Right.
if she's coping with drugs or alcohol, we need to first help her
Mm-hmm.
cope with these emotions, right? And not focus on the behavior. And then to take away the things that anchor her to her beloved child is about as wrong-minded thinking as I can come up with. There's the problem. That's the pathology.
Right. What do you say to parents who feel guilty for moments of joy that they feel after a loss?
It's a good question.
Yeah, that's a thing. That's a thing for real. Lots of people I've worked with have talked about that. I remember the first time I laughed after my daughter died and I grabbed my face like this.
Yeah. Like
And I was
what?
like, oh my God, did anyone see me laugh? What kind of mother laughs when her child is dead? Like that was like the theme. And I think that's one of the things, the liberating things about being at the farm is that because they're in a group environment with other people who have grieved, and because they cry so much and can express so much, so the bottom falls out, that most, I haven't actually, in 8 years of operating, I haven't had one person say they felt guilty about laughing here.
Yeah. Good.
Okay.
Well, that's beautiful.
And I think it's because they're also allowed to just sob here. So we'll be in a group setting. There will be 16 of us in a group setting, like crying. Someone said something so profoundly painful and stunningly honest that we're all just in tears, like snotty tears. And then that person will say something else that's really funny, and we're rolling on the floor laughing, crying now from laughing. But it feels so organic and
Right.
uncoerced.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It sure does. I mean, what a beautiful fellowship you've created, right? That, you know, what we were talking a little bit before we recorded about, would you rather be able to feel the full range of human emotion at the full depths of each one of those feelings, or not feel anything at all? And I mean, the answer is so clear, I think, for the three of us. But it takes a lot of bravery to allow yourself to feel the full range of human emotion and not, you know, think you're going to die in the process.
Yeah, and I'm going to go a step beyond that and just say full range of emotion, because animals also have grief. And they seem to do it in a much less complicated way because they just seem to show up for each other. Like here on the farm, when one of our goats dies, like Gretel, one of our beloved goats, she was such a lover girl. She would hug people. And she died suddenly, and her brother and her were very close. They would eat Captain Von Trapp. So Gretel, yeah, I know. I do name them. So Gretel and Captain Von Trapp ate together and slept together. And when they would sleep together, their heads would just touch and they would lean on each other. I mean, they were just so sweet. And when Gretel died, like for months, Captain, who was this normal, you know, just this, he would walk around. He was like a bobblehead. He would walk around and wagging his tail. He was such a joyful goat. And then Gretel died and he hung his head for months and was so sad and would just cry out to her, just cry and call her. And of course she was dead, so she couldn't call back. And then he would go and lie down by himself next to a rock and be so sad. And the other goats would just come around him and sit next to him. And they didn't expect anything of him, and they didn't try and cheer him up. They just loved him through it. And so it's not just human emotions, it's also non-human emotion.
Sure.
Like we can actually learn how to be good supporters of grieving people by watching animals. Think about J95, Talekwa, the pilot whale who lost her baby and then carried her baby's body around the Salish Sea for 7 weeks. She had the help of her pod. They helped her carry that baby. When she was tired, they would pick up the slack and carry the baby with her. That she had her entire pod with her the whole time. And she was grieving. And we just don't do that as humans.
So do you have hope for us as humans? with everything you've witnessed? Because you started at the beginning of our conversation talking about your grandmother and then your mother, who you described in some characteristics of being a little cold. And that
Yes.
is nothing.
Yes.
You don't exhibit any of those types of characteristics. So somewhere along the line, you were brave enough to say, not me, generational trauma that has been held on to and that grief. I'm going to be brave enough to feel it, and then to allow others into that space where you sit and hold. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing that you've allowed and created, because you've helped and healed so many others. So do you have hope for us as humans moving forward when you witness animals grieving so beautifully? Where do you see us going from here?
I mean, some days I have hope, and other days I just throw myself on the floor like a 2-year-old throwing a tantrum and say, it's hopeless. It just depends on the day. I don't heal people, though. I mean, I just give people space and love them through it, and they do their own work. I mean, that's the magic of giving people permission to feel.
Absolutely.
And helping them feel safe enough to feel and fully inhabit their grief. I think we can go the right direction if we keep having hard conversations like this. I mean, these are the hardest conversations. There are other hard conversations to have, but the ones around mortality and the people we love, the people we love most in the world dying, are the hardest conversations to have. They're the hardest things to think about. They are the thing that every human being who is alive today will experience at one point or another, the death of a much beloved one. And so everyone is going to know this pain. And I think that's what makes it so terrifying, but it's also what makes it so important.
Right.
Yes.
I think people whose hearts have been shattered open are the potential peacemakers of the world. And I think if we don't fully inhabit our grief, we don't get to that place. We don't get to the place of peacemaking.
Right.
I'll have to reflect on that. Yeah.
It's such a good reminder. Tell us a little bit about your upcoming film release.
Oh, well, we have a documentary about the Carefarm coming out. I think the name is going to be Sacred Pause. It was initially Selah, but people don't know what the word Selah means, which means basically sacred pause
in Hebrew.
And it's a documentary about what we do here at the Carefarm. The centerpiece of the documentary is really a bereaved father. His name is Eric. His 6-month-old, 2-year-old, and 3-year-old were murdered. And his story is prominent. And then we have other families like Jennifer and her son Brandon, and Sarah and her daughter Grace, who are featured in the documentary, who came out to do a program at the farm. And he follows them, and it's really just about what we do here at the farm and how we help people fully inhabit their grief, but also connect with a sense of greater compassion for self, and for those who are like us and have shared experiences, and those who are very different from us, including animals and the planet. It's really a film about fully inhabiting our grief so that we can fully transform that grief into compassion for all beings.
And when is this coming out? So for people listening that want to support.
I think it should be out by the end of the year.
Wonderful.
That's exciting. And you're going to continue to do amazing work and allow people to, you hold beautiful space. So thank you for doing all that you do. I know that
Thank you.
It's very profound, allowing people to feel safe enough to feel the full range of emotion, and then just to learn how to hold space with that grief and to live with your grief and not just get over it.
Yeah. We call it being with grief. It's a kind of integration process, right? Like everything that I do, every move I make in the world, I'm bringing my dead child forward with me, because she can't move in the world. So I have to move in the world with her, not away from her, but with her. And it's not an impediment. To the contrary, it makes everything more beautiful, even though it comes with sorrow and pain.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for sharing about Eileen.
Mm-hmm.
I'll hold her in my heart today.
Appreciate that.
And we'll hold you in our hearts today.
Thank you.
There's a lot of healing in just sharing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Indeed.
Absolutely. And I think showing up for each other, in death and dying, and then in grief, I think there's nothing more like sacred or profound. So,
Right.
so this is who we are.
I agree. I'll close with a quote by Catherine Ann Porter. She said, "The past is never where we think we left it."
Ooh,
Yeah, right.
that's a good one.
And so the invitation is to work with it
Yeah.
when it asks to be seen.
Ooh, thank you. Thank you
Thanks
for that,
having.
Dr. Joanne Cacciatore.
And
Thank you for inviting me. It's good to see you. It's good to meet you, Dr. Tracy.
yeah, next time you're here this way, we would love to spend time
Yeah.
with you and Maya and be together.
I hope you should have her bring you up to the farm.
Yes,
Well,
no,
I'm
for
ready for some
sure.
barefoot hiking. A little grounding is good for
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can hike around the farm barefoot, but you're gonna walk through a lot of poop.
Yeah, okay, a little poop on my feet. I'm not afraid of that.
It's good for your microbiome.
Just want to hang out with the animals.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
All right. I love you. I love you. I love you.
Thank you.
Mwah. Bye.
Bye.
Me